In the final months of 1968, Elvis Presley secretly had his brand new Cadillac Eldorado customized with a one-way intercom system, allowing him to speak to people outside the car without ever opening a window, sealing himself inside a rolling vault of steel and glass. But was he trying to keep the world out? Or was he desperately trying to keep something in? The night was a velvet shroud draped over the Hollywood Hills, pierced by a million indifferent diamonds of light from the sprawling city below. Inside the cocoon of the Cadillac, the air was thick with the scent of leather, Cuban cigar smoke, and something else. Something cold. For Elvis, this car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a confessional, a sanctuary, a tomb on wheels. He drove not to arrive, but to escape the suffocating silence of the new house on Hillcrest Road, a mansion that felt more like a mausoleum for a life he no longer recognized. He was the king, reborn. The '68 comeback special had been a triumph of snarling, leather-clad resurrection. He had defied the critics, slayed the doubters, and reminded the world who he was. But the man behind the wheel felt like an imposter. The roar of the crowd had faded, replaced by a deeper, more persistent hum, a frequency of dread that vibrated right up through the floorboards of his soul. The engine was a low, guttural purr, the only sound in his sealed-off world. He had silenced the radio, silenced the Memphis Mafia, silenced everyone. He needed to think, or rather, he needed to stop thinking. The Hollywood movie machine had chewed him up and spit him out, leaving him a caricature in a string of forgettable films. The comeback was supposed to fix that. It was supposed to make him feel real again. Instead, it had only made the ghost more restless. He told himself it was just exhaustion, the pressure, the weight of the crown he had just reclaimed. But he knew it was a lie. It was a presence, as real and as chilling as the night air. It started as a whisper in the quiet moments, a flicker in his peripheral vision. Now, it had a weight. It sat beside him in the passenger seat, an invisible passenger on these endless, nocturnal drives. He gripped the wheel tighter, his gaze fixed on the serpentine asphalt unspooling before him. He was running. He had been running his whole life. Running from the crushing poverty of Tupelo. Running from the screaming girls who wanted to tear him apart. Running from the ghost of the man he was supposed to be. But tonight, the thing he was running from was inside the car with him. He could feel its cold gaze on the back of his neck, could hear its silent judgment in the hum of the tires. And he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that sooner or later, he would have to turn and face it. He risked a glance at the rearview mirror, expecting to see only his own tired reflection. But for a split second, something else was there. A face, pale and sorrowful, superimposed over his own. It was a woman's face, faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. It was his mother. The apparition vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving him breathless, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. It couldn't be. Gladys had been gone for 10 years. A decade. An eternity. He slammed his foot on the brake, the Cadillac screeching to a halt on the shoulder of Mulholland Drive, its tires kicking up dust and gravel. The silence that rushed in was deafening. He wasn't just grieving. This was different. This was an accusation. Her face in the mirror, it hadn't been loving. It had been filled with a profound, bottomless disappointment. He fumbled for a cigar, his hands trembling so badly it took 3 attempts to light it. The flare of the match illuminated a face, etched with a fear that no stage fright could ever rival. This was the secret he kept even from his closest confidants, the men who lived and breathed his air. He had been seeing her for weeks, in reflections, in the shadows of his empty rooms, in the faces of strangers in a crowd. He'd tried to drown her out with noise, with women, with the hollow laughter of his entourage. But she always came back, and she was always strongest here, in the dark, in the car. Because the car knew. This Cadillac, this magnificent beast of chrome and steel, was a monument to everything he had become. A Hollywood king, a man who lived in a gilded cage, surrounded by sycophants who called him boss and cashed his checks. A man so far removed from the dirt poor boy in Tupelo who promised his mama he'd never change, that he might as well be on another planet. He looked at the empty seat beside him, and for the first time, he spoke to it. "What do you want from me, Mama?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The only answer was the sigh of the wind rustling through the canyon brush outside. But he heard her, not with his ears, but in his soul. "You remember your promise, boy? You remember what you promised me?" The promise. The one he had made with his hand on her Bible, the day before he shipped out to Germany. The one he had broken 1,000 times over, in the service of fame and fortune. He felt a wave of nausea. The ghost wasn't just in the car. The ghost was him. It was the boy he had murdered to become the king. He started the car and drove. Faster this time. more reckless. He was no longer trying to escape the silence. He was trying to outrun the voice. He took the curves of the Hollywood Hills with a wild abandon, the tires squealing in protest. The city lights below smeared into a chaotic river of fire, a reflection of the inferno in his mind. His mind raced back, unbidden, to the day he bought Graceland. He'd brought Gladys there, her eyes wide with a mixture of pride and fear. "Avis," she had said, her voice thick with her country accent, her hand clutching his arm. "This is too much. This ain't us. We're simple folk." He had laughed then, a big, confident laugh. "Nothing's too much for my mama," he'd boomed. "I'm gonna buy you the world." But he hadn't bought her the world. He had bought her a golden cage. He surrounded her with strangers and filled her home with noise. And then he left. He went to Hollywood, to the land of make-believe. And while he was playing a soldier in the movies, his real mother was wasting away, drowning her loneliness in drink, lost in the cavernous mansion he had built for her. "I didn't know," he muttered to the windshield. "I didn't know how bad it was." But the voice in the passenger seat was unforgiving. "You knew. You just didn't want to see." His hand fumbled inside the glove compartment, past the registration papers and a spare pair of sunglasses. His fingers brushed against something small and hard. He pulled it out. It was a small, tarnished silver locket. He clicked it open. Inside was a tiny, faded picture of a serious-looking boy with slicked back hair. It was him, at age 13. On the other side was a picture of Gladys, young and smiling. He'd given it to her for her birthday in 1948. He thought it had been buried with her. He slammed the locket shut, his breath catching in his throat. How did it get here? He hadn't seen it in over a decade. Joe Esposito, his right-hand man, had been the one to clean out her room at Graceland after the funeral. Joe had given him a box of her things, but the locket wasn't in it. Elvis had torn the box apart looking for it. So how, in God's name, did it end up in the glove compartment of a car he'd bought just a few months ago? The car suddenly felt colder, the space more confined. The presence beside him was no longer just a feeling of sorrow. It was a physical force, pressing in on him. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. It was the icy touch of the inexplicable, the supernatural. He was a man who dabbled in spiritualism, who read books on life after death, always searching for a connection to his stillborn twin, Jesse. But this was different. This wasn't a comforting theory in a book. This was real. He drove on, the locket clenched in his fist. He was no longer just a man haunted by memory. He was a man being hunted. He left the winding roads of the hills and descended into the city, merging onto the freeway. The endless river of headlights and taillights became a hypnotic, terrifying blur. He was just another car, another anonymous soul hurtling through the Los Angeles night. But his car was a crypt. He needed to talk to someone. But who? Who could possibly understand? If he told the guys, they'd think he was losing his mind. They'd call the doctor, and the doctor would give him something to help him sleep, something to dull the edges. But he didn't want to be dulled. For the first time in years, he felt terrifyingly, horribly awake. He needed answers, and he had a strange, chilling premonition that the only answers he would find were waiting for him in the darkness, right here, in this car. The ghost began to speak, not in words, but in memories, projected onto the screen of his mind like one of his own bad movies. He saw Gladys on the porch of their shotgun shack in Tupelo, her face worn with worry, humming a gospel hymn. He saw the terror in her eyes the day he left for the army, a fear so profound he knew she believed she would never see him again. And she had been right. He saw the broken promise. "I'll call you every week, Mama, no matter what." In the beginning, he did. But then Hollywood, the movie sets, the parties, the women, they got in the way. A week became 2. 2 weeks became a month. He'd send money, cars, gifts. He bought her everything but the one thing she ever wanted, her son. The Cadillac hummed along the Santa Monica freeway, a river of concrete and steel cutting through the heart of the city of fallen angels. He felt like an open wound, the armor of the king stripped away, leaving only the terrified boy from Mississippi. The voice was clearer now, a fusion of his mother's sorrow and his own self-loathing. "You traded your soul for a swimming pool," it whispered. "You let them turn you into a joke, singing to dogs, racing dune buggies on a soundstage. Is this the man you wanted to be? Is this what I raised?" "No," he choked out, the word a ragged sob. "I had to do it. The Colonel, he said it was the only way." "The Colonel? The Colonel wasn't there when you were sick. The Colonel didn't hold you when the nightmares came. I was there. And you left me. You left me to die alone in that big, empty house." The accusation hung in the air, heavier than any sin. It was the truth, the unbearable, unvarnished truth he had spent 10 years running from. He had been in basic training when she got sick. The army doctors, The specialists he flew in, none of it mattered. He got leaved, flew to her bedside, held her hand as she faded away. But he knew, in his heart of hearts, that the sickness had started long before. It was a sickness of the soul, a loneliness so profound it had poisoned her from the inside out. He suddenly remembered a night, just weeks before she died. He'd been on the phone with her from Fort Hood. She was drunk, her words slurring, but her meaning was crystal clear. "They're trying to take you from me, Elvis," she'd cried. "That colonel, and that Hollywood, it's the devil's work. It'll kill what's good in you. You made a promise on the Bible, son. You promised you'd never let them change the boy I raised." He had dismissed it as a drunken ramble. He had gotten angry, told her to sober up. It was the last real conversation they ever had. Now, in the haunted cockpit of the Cadillac, he understood. The ghost wasn't a warning of a dark path ahead. It was a judgment on the path he had already taken. The comeback special wasn't a resurrection. It was a desperate plea for forgiveness, a howl of rage directed at himself, broadcast to the entire world. And it hadn't been enough. The car's radio crackled to life, seemingly of its own accord. It wasn't static. It was music, a faint, tinny melody playing from a station that didn't exist. It was a gospel hymn, "Peace in the Valley," the song he and Gladys used to sing together in the First Assembly of God Church in Tupelo. His blood ran cold. He reached out a trembling hand and stabbed the off button, but the music continued, growing louder, filling the car with its mournful, sacred sound. He was trapped in a memory, a four-wheeled time machine taking him back to a place of pain and purity he could never reclaim. "Shut up!" he screamed, banging his fist on the dashboard. "Leave me alone!" The music stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was more terrifying than the hymn had been. He was hyperventilating, his vision blurring. He pulled the car over, this time into a deserted, poorly lit industrial area near the edge of the city. He killed the engine. For a long time he just sat there, the silence pressing in. He was at the bottom. The glamour of the hills, the energy of the city, it was all gone. Here, in the forgotten fringe of Los Angeles, there was only him and the truth. He was a fraud, a $40 million king ruling over an empire of loneliness. He leaned his forehead against the cold steering wheel. The leather felt like a stranger's skin. He began to talk, not in a whisper, but in a full, conversational tone, as if someone were truly sitting right there beside him. He confessed everything, his fears, his shame over the movies, his resentment of the colonel, his terror that the comeback was a fluke, and that soon, everyone would see him for what he truly was, a scared little boy from Mississippi, playing dress-up in a king's clothes. "I tried, Mama," he said, his voice raw. "I really did. I thought if I made enough money, if I became famous enough, that we'd be safe, that nothing could ever hurt us again, like that poverty hurt us. But I lost my way. I lost you. And now, I've lost myself. I look in the mirror, and I don't know who that person is. He looks like me. He sounds like me, but his eyes are empty." He laid it all bare in the belly of the Cadillac. The years of pills to wake up, pills to go to sleep, pills to get through the day. The hollow affairs that left him feeling emptier than before. The gnawing, insatiable hunger for the one thing he could never get back. The simple, unconditional love of the one person who knew him before the world claimed him. He felt a strange sense of release, as if lancing a wound. The pressure in the car seemed to lessen. The cold spot in the passenger seat dissipated, replaced by a neutral stillness. He had finally said it. He had confessed his sins to the ghost that haunted him. He then remembered something he had buried deep. A secret trip. Just after the comeback special wrapped, before it had even aired, he felt the old darkness closing in. On a whim, he had slipped away from the guys, taken a different car, and driven for 2 days straight, all the way to Tupelo. He had visited the two-room shack where he was born. He had stood in the quiet cemetery, staring at the graves of his mother and his brother, Jesse. He hadn't told a soul. Not Priscilla. Not his father. Not Joe. It was his own private pilgrimage. He was looking for a sign, for forgiveness, for a way back. But he had found nothing. Just cold stone and silence. The trip had only deepened his despair, proving to him that he could never go home again. That was when the haunting had truly begun. As he sat there, lost in this devastating memory, a pair of headlights washed over his car, followed by the jarring pulse of red and blue flashing lights. He looked up, blinded and disoriented. A police car had pulled up silently behind him. An officer was walking towards the driver's side window, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. The king, the idol of millions, was about to be confronted by the law in his moment of ultimate, private collapse. The sharp rap of knuckles on the glass jolted him. "Sir, everything all right in there? You've been parked here for a while." Elvis took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He was a mess. His eyes were red, his face tear-stained. He looked like any other lost soul on the verge of a breakdown. He slowly, deliberately, lowered the electric window. The cool night air rushed in, feeling like a slap in the face. The officer, a young, crew-cut cop, peered inside. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Well, I'll be Elvis?" The king managed a weak, tired smile. It was a mask he had perfected over 2 decades. "Evening, officer. Just clearing my head." The cop was starstruck. He fumbled for his words. "Oh, sure, Mr. Presley. Sorry to bother you. We just got a call about a suspicious vehicle. Didn't know it was you." He looked at Elvis, then at the empty, desolate street. A flicker of concern crossed his face. "You sure you're okay, sir? You look a little shaken." For a moment, Elvis considered telling him. Considered just letting it all spill out to this complete stranger. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. He was the most famous man in the world, and he had never felt more alone. But the mask slipped back into place. The training took over. "I'm fine, son," he said, his voice regaining some of its familiar, reassuring baritone. "Just a long day, getting ready for this new show in Vegas." The lie came easily. It was a good lie, a believable one. The cop nodded, relieved to be back on solid ground. "Vegas? That's fantastic. Well, don't let us keep you. Have a good night, Mr. Presley." He backed away, giving a respectful nod, and walked back to his patrol car. Elvis watched in the rearview mirror as they pulled away, their flashing lights disappearing down the dark street. He was alone again. But something had shifted. The confrontation, the jolt of reality, had broken the spell. He was no longer just a man drowning in his own past. He was Elvis Presley, and he had a choice. He could stay here in the dark, parked on the edge of oblivion, and let the ghosts consume him entirely. Or he could do the only thing he knew how to do. He could perform. He would go to Vegas. He would build a show so big, so bright, so loud, that it would drown out the whispers from the passenger seat. He would encase himself in rhinestone jumpsuits, armor against the darkness. He would surround himself with the roar of a sold-out crowd, a sound loud enough to deafen the voice of his own conscience. It wasn't a solution. It was an escape, a magnificent, spectacular, and ultimately doomed escape. He would not defeat his ghosts. He would simply try to outrun them on a stage, under 1,000 spotlights. The decision made, he put the car in gear. As he pulled away from the curb, a strange detail about this specific Cadillac surfaced in his mind, something one of the customizers had told him. The car's official color was Chateau Gray, but in certain lights it appeared almost silver, almost spectral. The man had joked, "It's like a ghost, Mr. Presley, hard to pin down." And history records a strange footnote about this car. Years later, after Elvis had given it away, its new owner would report inexplicable electrical problems. The radio turning on and off by itself, the lights flickering, the intercom crackling with what sounded like faint, distant whispers. The car, it seemed, retained a memory. It held an echo of those long, tormented nights. Elvis didn't go home to Hillcrest Road. He didn't seek the comfort of his bed or the company of his friends. He pointed the nose of the spectral Cadillac east, toward the desert, toward the city of neon and second chances. He was driving toward Las Vegas. He was driving toward his destiny, a future of triumph and tragedy that would be forged in the crucible of the desert. He was driving to become a living legend, and in doing so, to become a ghost himself, long before he ever left the building. The long, straight ribbon of Interstate 15 stretched out before him, a dark path into the heart of the Mojave Desert. The city of Los Angeles, with all its promises and its poisons, receded in his rearview mirror, until it was just a faint, hazy glow against the black horizon. He was free, or so he told himself. He had escaped the haunted hills, escaped the prying eyes of the law, escaped the suffocating silence of his mansion. He pushed the Cadillac faster, the speedometer needle climbing past 100. The sheer speed was a narcotic, a physical sensation powerful enough to blot out the emotional turmoil. The wind roared past the sealed windows, a symphony of pure, unadulterated motion. But he wasn't alone. He knew that now. The passenger seat was no longer empty. It was occupied by an acceptance, a resignation. The ghost of his mother, the ghost of his younger self, the ghost of the promise he had broken, they weren't gone. They had simply settled in for the ride. They were a permanent part of him now, a silent chorus to his life's third and final act. He thought about Vegas, the International Hotel, a stage bigger than any he had ever commanded, an orchestra, a full choir. He would reinvent himself not as a rock and roller, but as a demigod, a supernova of sound and light. It was a beautiful, desperate, brilliant plan. He would create a spectacle so overwhelming it would leave no room for shadows, no space for whispers. He would become pure energy, pure performance. But even in the fury of this new resolve, a cold dread coiled in his gut. What would happen when the music stopped? What would happen when the lights went down and the applause died away? He would be left alone in a cavernous hotel suite, a king in a kingdom of one, with only the silent passengers in his soul for company. The performance couldn't last forever. A sign flashed by in the darkness. Barstow, 60 miles. The halfway point. The point of no return. And a chilling new thought entered his mind. A piece of the puzzle he hadn't considered. The ghost wasn't just a memory of his mother. It was also the shade of his twin brother, Jesse Garin, the boy who had died at birth. Elvis had lived his whole life feeling Jesse's absence, carrying the burden of being the one who survived. He had always felt he was living for two. Perhaps, he thought with a shudder, this was Jesse's judgment too. Jesse, the pure one, the one who never had to face the temptations of the world, of fame, of Hollywood. Maybe the voice in the car was the combined weight of the two people he could never save, the two souls to whom he was eternally bound, the mother who died and the brother who never lived. He had failed them both. He had survived. And for what? To sing silly songs in bad movies and insulate himself with money. The guilt was immense, a weight that threatened to crush him. The drive to Vegas was no longer an escape. It was a funeral procession. He was burying the last remnants of Elvis Aaron Presley, the boy from Tupelo. In his place would rise Elvis, the stage entity, the jumpsuit-clad icon, a living, breathing monument. And like all monuments, he would be magnificent, revered, and ultimately made of stone. Cold and alone, he reached for the radio, his fingers hovering over the dial. He didn't turn it on. He didn't need to. He could already hear the music, the opening fanfare of his new life. It was bombastic, triumphant, and utterly, heartbreakingly hollow. The ghost in the Cadillac was silent now. It didn't need to speak. It had already won. It would ride with him all the way to the end of the line. The unending drive had begun. And the truth, the dark and tragic secret of the Hollywood Hills, was that for Elvis Presley, the drive would never, ever end. He would spend the rest of his life behind the wheel, with a ghost in the passenger seat, forever chasing the echo of an applause loud enough to make him feel alive, while driving deeper and deeper into the lonely, silent night. The king had made his comeback, but the man had lost his way in the dark. The stories of what truly happened on those lonely drives would be buried with him, becoming just another secret in the mythology of Elvis Presley. A mythology we are dedicated to uncovering. If you crave the real stories behind the legend, the truths hidden in the shadows of fame, then subscribe to forever_Elvis_stories. Join us as we continue to explore the soul of the king. Click the bell icon so you never miss